Yeah, we'll start. Yeah, we'll save. This will be the first question. A hard-hitting question. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this exciting and highly relevant panel discussion entitled "Utilizing AI: Tools Students Should Incorporate to Boost Their Professional Development." I'm Dr. A.J. Merlino, the Associate Vice President of Student Professional Development and Experiential Learning here at Harrisburg University. Artificial intelligence has rapidly transitioned from being the subject of a science fiction novel to a critical tool that reshapes various sectors, including education and the job market. Whether we're talking about machine learning, data and analytics, or automation, AI technologies are not just changing how we work, but also how we prepare ourselves for the world of work. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from a distinguished group of experts who are at the forefront of this technological revolution. They're here to help guide us and train us on the tools that AI can help provide us and incorporate into our skill sets in everyday life. In a landscape where employers are increasingly valuing digital proficiency and adaptability, the insights from today's discussion will be invaluable for students, faculty, and community partners alike. So, without further delay, I'd like to ask each panelist to briefly introduce themselves and their backgrounds in AI and professional development. And Jameson, we'll start with you.
Thanks for having me here. My name is Jameson Rotz. I'm the founder and CEO of Nearly Human AI, and we've been around for quite some time. I started this company about a decade ago as a consultancy, and we ended up moving into the AI field back when machine learning and predictive analysis was first finding its way into the customer support contact centers. And since then, our technology has evolved, and I'm here today to talk about, obviously, the new generative AI, because now we've managed to move this up the value chain from simple customer support responses to actually sophisticated interactions that can start taking on tasks for people at work.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Kayla Cullen. I'm a project manager, at CAI, located in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I come from a little bit of a different background than probably some of the other panelists here. I actually help manage AI projects. So rather than doing the coding side of things, I help manage all of the automation and development life cycles behind it. So our main focus at CAI for my team on the intelligent automation team is automation in general. So we do a lot of RPA along with IA projects.
And I'm Derek Hoyt. So previously I worked at Amazon Alexa and also Palantir, bringing AI both to at-scale international commercial entities to government organizations and agencies. In addition, I did an extensive background in the Defense Intelligence Agency, deploying AI systems and components to national security requirements and different mission sets there. Now I'm heavily focused on, I started my own company. It's called GovSignals, and its premise is actually taking the RFP and proposal and grant processes that companies and academic institutions are working on, and using generative AI components, we're able to generate RFP responses in minutes, which is before it used to take up to 2 to 3 weeks in a heavy, laborious process. So that's what I'm working on now, and actually that's one of the things I'd love to talk about as we go on.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Big round of applause for our panelists. So our first question, how has the adoption of AI tools changed the professional landscape for students and job seekers in recent years? Jump on in there.
Yeah, I can go first there. So I think one of the things that, especially, let's take a student perspective, AI tools themselves, right? I look at them as like a force multiplier. Like traditionally, they are, I guess, let's go back like even just a few years ago. They were just very simple input-output processes. They were just simple tools that could handle a small variety of different projects. But now, within the last, say, year, with the advent of large language models and different capabilities, we're now able to do more. So from a student's perspective, it opens up a whole new variety of options. So for example, Using generative AI systems, you can now output different, let's use like papers or academic journals or writings, content, and stuff like that that is of interest to a student. Now, if you switch that then to the professional side, which is where I'm interested in, it's, hey, you have business processes that you're trying to optimize. There is waste all over the place. And now with the advent of AI capabilities, we can actually deliver value immediately with tangible time savings, which before we just couldn't, and actually having really fast ROI on a business perspective.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, I see it as what we were talking about before, sort of a general leveling up of the baseline knowledge, right? Because anything that's language based at this point, and it's not even language based. You'll hear me talk about language. My company has been in the NLP space, so this is where I live and work. I'll tend to gravitate toward the language side of things, but generative AI across the board, whether it's video, imagery, or language, you have this very small barrier to entry to sort of like the consensus of the internet on virtually any topic. And so I think what that means both in the professional world and in the academic world is that the first 30 to 50% of the language-oriented work that you're doing should happen extremely quickly now. And the generalized tools can do that instantly. And you should take advantage of that and then spend that time that you would have spent on getting over the blank sheet of paper or organizing your outline. You can see the consensus of what everybody thinks about this particular topic, and then you can start to hone in on like the value that you're going to add to that part. And that's what's exciting to me to see happen, and I think that's where there's a lot of benefit across the board.
And then just to piggyback off that, I think the creative thought still needs to be there. So using ChatGPT or what have you to kind of lay that framework like you were talking about is still valuable, but then having your own thoughts put into it, so having that creative thought, the things that we're just not quite there yet with artificial intelligence is where the students are really going to have to focus on.
I think there's a fascinating thing that's happening, and a lot of the students in the room could probably attest to this, where no one would be angry at someone that's building a house to use a hammer, right? Just like if we bring it in a different context, using generative AI in Photoshop just to edit out some things that we don't want in a photo, right? But then when we bridge the gap into academics, the ethical dilemma that comes into place, where owning knowledge and disseminating knowledge becomes this thing of an ethical practice. So what are our thoughts where the social consensus is going to come to a place where we can actually use generative AI as a tool instead of as a faux pas in the academic space?
I mean, I think it's happening really fast. I mean, to Derek's point, like these, this is like measurable results. So when you think about productivity and especially cost, right? There's not only is there going to be like an acceptance of it, there's going to be an expectation of it. I might not hire a contractor who's using a hammer because I want them using pneumatic nailers because I know they'll get done 40% faster, right?
I love that you brought that back.
So I see that happening, and quite honestly, people are at different places on the adoption curve, but I think that the businesses that are starting to leverage these tools and get rid of some of the waste and inefficiency, they're going to be the ones in 5 years from now that are going to be leading their fields.
I fully concur with that statement. And I think when I hear the principle of ethics come up, especially when it comes to like AI technology in general, the way I like to denote AI is it's a dual use capability. So what that means is, in one hand, you can have productivity gains and really advantageous positive aspects on society. But on the exact same flip side, you can use that exact same technology to exploit, cause harm, destroy networks, and enact negative implications, basically, for humans. So because of that dual-use nature of any type of capability, it's very important from the human operator's perspective, which is, what are you doing with this tool, and how are you, as the operator, going to behave with this newfound power?
Being responsible with it, absolutely. And the bad actors are going to be doing it regardless of whether the good actors choose or choose not to. And so it's a matter of getting the positive impact out of the tools.
And I think there's also a generational gap with that, right? So the new generation is being brought up with more technology, social media, like a lot more information just thrown at you constantly. Ads, your phone's constantly probably vibrating with something, sending you a notification. The older generation doesn't have that. So it's going to take them a little bit longer to adapt. In my professional opinion, Google is one of my best friends, along with artificial intelligence. If I know from an academic side, there's a lot of memorization, a lot of critical thinking, and that still is the case from an academic standpoint. But I don't need to memorize this block of code all the time. I can just Google it. You don't have that obviously when you're sitting down taking an exam, but I think it's just going to take a little bit and a few more years for people to get all on board.
You save that brain space for the pieces of the technology that you're working on that are going to differentiate you from the other ones, because the stuff that's being spit out of an LLM is by nature commoditized, right?
Exactly.
I think it's interesting too that you mentioned Google, because like Google it, like we're actually asking you to put it in a search engine and click that enter, like look for it, right? So the conversation becomes Google it has become such a generic that we've accepted it as, oh, this is how we're going to start our research process. This is how we're going to start delving into a new topic. And it'd be interesting to see 5-10 years, what's the generic version of AI it? Where is that going to be? So just talking about where the future may be, what are some key trends that you see in maybe the professional development world that students can capitalize on or should be aware of in the generative AI space?
I think it's definitely worth doctoring your resume now, having that set so when you guys are ready to graduate or even before that when you're sending out applications, use your tools to your disposal and ask your AI model, how can I make my resume better? If you're applying for a position at a certain company, throw that into the mix, saying how can I make my resume specific to X? So I think definitely using what you have to help further your career.
And then when you do that, understand that I look at this from the other perspective, where I have 500 resumes coming at my head, and so once you've done that and you use the tool to improve, then look at that and say, okay, this tool that just did this for me has done this for every other applicant out there. So how am I going to make mine different based on my unique skills and abilities so that those things stand out, right? Because that's what people are going to be hiring for, and that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. The hiring thing is a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of algorithms on the other hand trying to make the hiring people's jobs easier, and so it's algorithm versus algorithm, which is going to be the way of the future very, very quickly. So you need to have some of those components of what's generated in your resume, because that's what some of these algorithms are going to pick up on. But you also need to differentiate yourself so that when you make it to the human, you stand out.
I think one thing also to add, so even just in the discussion of trends, right? So there's different buckets of AI innovation out there. So we have been talking a lot about generative AI, but another piece that I've had some background experience on, right, is like compute and AI capabilities at the edge of networks. And so these are critical needs that for both, well, for my case, it was related to national security implications and why we need this type of stuff. So because there are so many different buckets of AI-driven and/or enhanced opportunities out there, from a student entering, basically graduating and getting ready to enter the workforce, realizing that there is a lot of opportunity here, and how you go about in your career and either using AI or working on projects that will enhance AI. I think that the primary piece here is to remember that these trends are all about continuous improvement, enhancing, and so the core fundamental of that is always being ready to change and be adaptable. So I think I was thinking through that and the question on trends. I was like, you're right, trends and fads and different technologies will come and go. But the one constant that I think every student should have, especially now in 2023, is the ability to handle change gracefully and have that foundational flexibility, for lack of a better phrase, because change is only going to happen even faster.
It is. I mean, we're already entering into sort of phase 2, right? The recent releases in the past couple of weeks with multimodal technology, which is going to come on really fast, and the integration that's happening behind the scenes between the AI systems and everything else that you use. This next year is going to be probably just as transformative as the last one because of the use cases that are going to come online. But the thing that every one of you has over these machines and will continue to have over these machines, the two things that I wrote down thinking of it in terms of like specifically from my perspective, it's a technology company, but I think this applies to everywhere, is your productivity and your critical thinking. And if you take those two things and you look at how can I leverage these tools and stay up to date with them, like get your hands on the latest stuff as it comes out so that you can see where this is going, because it's happening so fast that if you're talking about like looking for a job in a year, a lot of what's like hitting the streets right now is going to be at least a partial reality in the workspace by that time. So you want to be well versed in this stuff to understand how you can leverage your particular talents and skills and critical thinking to be the most productive at your job, because the people that can use this technology to be more productive are going to be multipliers more valuable than folks who are just still trying to do it all on their own.
Derek, you mentioned something interesting. We talked about generative AI, and that's usually where people go, right? We think ChatGPT, that's our language modeling. We're going to get a bunch of text out of it, or generative AI for like Photoshop, getting things out. But there, like you mentioned, there's a bunch of different AI that we could talk about. Can all of you just mention some foundational AI concepts that are really useful for students, specifically for students at a STEM institution that have a varying degree of majors and different interests?
Sure, I can think through that. So if I had to boil it down, right? So like all AI related efforts require, I guess you could say, a handful of core principles, which is having an understanding of data structures, and understanding, honestly, the basics of engineering 101, which is, how do you set up a system? How do you manage inputs and outputs, and understand flow and the flow of data? And if you get down to that core fundamental, then everything else is just nuanced add-ons, in my opinion. Like then, which scripting language do you use, and which ML framework, is it PyTorch or something else, and MXNet, or then you can get into the nuances of the different systems out there. But that would be at a high level the overarching premise, which is engineering 101, data structures, data organization, and understanding the concept of input outputs. So.
And to build off that, also having a really core understanding of mathematics. So everything from the AI models are built on some form of algorithm and statistics. So having a core foundation on just what those algorithms are kind of built off of will definitely help.
The one thing that I sort of tend to challenge folks to think about is a fundamental shift. I mean, I've spent my entire life delivering software, but we're at this place now where the way software operates has fundamentally changed, and I think that's really important for anybody in the STEM field to really think about. And the reason I say that is our expert systems of years before were basically logic gate systems, and so these could be highly complicated, but essentially what you were doing was programming for every scenario that you could think of. And if you fell down through this logic and got to the end and there was a scenario that the system encountered that you hadn't thought of, it would enter a fail state. And the way machine learning works is sort of the exact opposite. It's going to learn over a huge corpus of data, and it's going to operate not on discrete logic, but on probabilities. And these systems by nature will always offer an answer, even if it's low probability, unless you've developed something that defines what looks like an error state in the system. And so black swan events in these systems are at a much higher risk than we were previously, because when any of these machine learning systems are data starved, they will do bonkers things. And you have to be able to make sure that there are guardrails around these things. And so as you're developing these systems, you're going to have systems that can adapt more readily to the information that they're fed, but they have to be tested and thought about in a different way. And so that's the one thing that I challenge everybody who's in the STEM field to really think about as you go forward. There's immense power here, but the way they fail is completely different from our old expert systems.
Yeah, I have very funny stories, like working at Alexa and stuff like that on the fail safes and like, because you're right, like because these are statistical models, right? And you could give the same prompt or the same query or the same input, and you're gonna get sometimes different outputs, even though the exact same input was put in each time. And so, so some of the things that we've done to help mitigate that, right, is implementing going back to the old logic gate systems and rules and different ways to kind of help manage the risk that you're describing. But that risk still exists. And well, actually, we've even seen it in the news, like when Google Bard first came out and they did their demo and it failed. And their stock price took like a 6% hit overnight. So these are real risks that everyone is now.
When we blow a demo, we lose a potential client. Google lost $100
Yes.
billion.
100%. That is the new reality that big risk.
Are there specific industries, maybe outside of the norm, that would be affected by AI? And we talked a little bit about this prior to everyone getting here and going live. We talked about education being affected by AI and the world of plagiarism or not plagiarism or using it as a tool. What use cases can we bring up for specific industries, maybe outside of the norm?
Sure, I can go for there. So that's actually exactly why I created GovSignals, was because the use of generative AI capabilities transcends the basic just tech markets. So, for example, any company that is trying to find ways to optimize processes. So in the instance that I'm looking at is business development. So how do you bundle ideas that represent your company and then are able to, as quickly as possible in a high quality manner, deliver that content to a receiver who can then say, this is a good idea, let's now buy said product. And the current systems are painfully slow. Government acquisitions is like an 18-month cycle. And so like our North Star is using this technology. Why can't a government procurement process be done in a day from idea from the government that submits a request and then a company responds, or a plethora of companies respond, and then the best product at the best price and at the best time is then bought all within, let's say, a day. With the technology that we have now, this is now a new reality that we could get to. And so I think, and that's just one use case, but you could think of thousands of use cases in different industries that would benefit from this type of thinking.
Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking a lot of service desk related things. For example, like my password expired, right? Rather than calling the help desk, waiting on hold for 10, 15 minutes, you can just talk to a chatbot saying, hey, help me reset my password. Or, hey, my mouse broke. Well, maybe that wouldn't be a good example because I don't know how you would get there. But either way, if you have a problem, just talk to the chatbot rather than having to call the help desk and trying to figure it out. We just recently implemented a chatbot at my company, and it has helped me create multiple tickets, even reset my password, which is where the use case came up from. But it's a lot nicer than, nobody likes to talk on the phone anymore.
Yeah.
So rather than calling the help desk, it's a lot easier to chat.
And especially waiting on hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
our use cases are a little bit different from Derek's, but I think that the premise is the same, and that's like the velocity of the exchange of information. And so some of the things that we do is putting systems in place that can manage institutional knowledge instantaneously. And so that looks like things where in a bank, if you have policy, procedure, regulatory things that the staff needs to know in an instance and might not do on a daily basis to know off the top of their head, this is a really fast way to provide accurate information. There's ways now that you can successfully implement these things to be highly reliable and beat down all of the hallucinations and get to excellent results. The other interesting thing that we do is to work from a systems engineering perspective. One of the things that is really time consuming with any kind of system engineering process, especially with lifecycle management, where you need to make upgrades to systems that exist, is basically rehashing decisions from the past 20 years that have been made for all different kinds of reasons. And that iterative cycle is up to 30 to 50% of the engineering work that goes in. And so having large language models that can accurately answer all of the questions, both from if you're bringing new engineers on board to Surge with an upgrade, for example, or if you have new requirements that cross-cut old implementations, and there's 1,000 naysayers and or proponents and all of these questions that have to be adjudicated. These things can dramatically speed up that process. There's a lot of that friction that just has to do with passing information back and forth that can really gain a lot of productivity if you take that out.
A quick follow-up on that, because I have the technical program management background, and so I can't tell you how many times we had these constant battles as it relates to architecture frameworks and different databases and different systems in order to gain the optimal output required for the requirements. I didn't even think about that one, actually. That would be actually just fun in general. So just trying to, instead of having to do that manually and just based on experience, and because you get a crazy latency requirement, that comes in and you're trying to figure out how to meet these. And I like that
This
use
doesn't
case.
make any sense. Why are we doing it this way?
Yes.
And it's and typically you would tear it out and break it,
Yes.
and somebody they come back from purchasing and be like, "Why doesn't our system work? It used to work." And it's like, oh, because there was a decision that got made a long time ago that
I like that.
that we didn't know about and didn't think was important.
I want us to step back and brainstorm a little bit. And we're going to frame this out in the world of student learning and professional development. Now, what tools or platforms do you think students might consider using, and how would they use this to enhance their learning and enhance their professional development?
I mean, all of the obvious ones that are out there, there's a ton of stuff that's out there for free, right? So just be on those. I would highly recommend, paying the $20 for ChatGPT 4 because it is such an increment beyond where the free 3.5 Turbo is. That's going to give you really important insight into where these next generations of models go. Once the new Google model is out, that's going to level things up again. So it's a matter of staying current. This is moving quickly, and you're going to want to be on the forefront of understanding what their capability is and what their limitations are. Beyond that, you're going to start to see more and more integrations in the things that you're using. So your Copilot on GitHub, kick the tires on that stuff. Start simple and use everything that's available to you so you can see it work. Use it, take it with an enormous grain of salt. And when you're pushing past your area of expertise, that's when you need to start verifying everything that comes back, because there's still a lot of places where it's going to fall short. And if you're in a space that you're not particularly familiar with, that's obviously where it's going to bite you first.
To state the obvious, probably learn Python. The majority of these models are written with Python. And then also heavily, I would learn Git. There's a lot of free stuff out there, and if you don't understand how to, clone the code down from Git, you got to start at square one and learn Git. in anything free you can get your hands on. There's few things out there I think that you probably have to pay for to really get a deep understanding. I mean, if you're going for like a certification or something, that's a different story where you have to, meet these requirements in order to take the test. But YouTube is still one of my best friends. I learn everything on YouTube. My dishwasher broke. How do I fix my dishwasher? So, anything that's free, I would highly suggest, along with, Git and learning Python.
I just want to second the GitHub comment. Learn Git, and not just Git, but Git Flow. So get with a couple of groups of students, work together, understand what it's like to do a pull request, look at each other's code, look at how you merge and deploy in a CI/CD pipeline. If you're able to do that, you're going to get productive on my team twice as fast as somebody who has to learn that first.
I would challenge that even more to put conflicts in and try to learn how to merge that, because I can't tell you how many times things have broken because of merge conflicts.
It's funny. So before I give some other tools or thoughts as it relates to like GitHub, right? What we're all describing here is how do humans work together in a constructive way in order to achieve an outcome. And Git is just a mechanism, right, that we use to take person X's idea of the best code to solve a problem, and how does that merge, right, with the existing code base that's there? Well, that can sometimes create conflicts, right? So which is fun to see is that, yes, we're talking about all this fun AI technology, and we love it, right? That's why we're here, that's why we're sitting down. But at the core of it all, it's still humans figuring out ways to work together to solve problems as fast as we can. Because we all have 24 hours a day. How can we be as effective as we can with the tools that are available to us? And so one of the fun ways that I did, especially when I first started, because I actually had no technical background when I first started. I had got my undergrad in international relations, and I had no basis of technology. And I just self-learned everything. And eventually I got a job at Amazon, Alexa, and et cetera. But the point is that you don't have to get a college degree in order to be proficient in technology. So that's one thing I want to emphasize, and case in point for my life. But second, I studied a lot. So using systems like Coursera or EDX or these different, there is so much free, high quality material out there that you can really get a strong baseline in order to just have a conversation with and have an idea of what someone's talking about. So I think that's the fundamental premise is, can you have a conversation with someone and communicate ideas in a way that you both understand context and you understand what you're talking about, so that way you can build a relationship. Because at the end of the day, this is all about self-education, continuous learning, networking, and building those relationships necessary to be effective. That's basically my high-level synopsis.
It'd be impossible to talk about AI without talking about ethics, right? And ethics as a core principle of this. So as we talk about artists, as an artist, maybe as a scholar, as an academic, or a business person, what ethical considerations should students put on the table when they're using this tool? And where do you think, and I know I mentioned this earlier, where do you think the line is drawn between using it as a tool and using it as a crutch?
I'll jump in then. I think the main line comes down to, when do you stop thinking, and when does the machine do the thinking for you? If we remember two fundamental pieces, right? Like, machines are really good at scale, speed, and being able to provide like timely responses. But humans, we are gifted with intuition, foresight, critical thinking, and the ability to forecast and move things, and that strategic thinking. So when you marry those two together, you can get really good results. But when the human decides to start letting laziness set in, or complacency, because what's the first stage of death? It's stasis. So when you let that stasis seep in and you let the AI do most of the heavy lifting for you, in my opinion, that's when you've gone too far and it's drifted over.
I think that I completely agree. And I think that this comes at two levels, right? One is there's a whole bunch of litigation and things that we're going to have to sort out in terms of fair use. Obviously, OpenAI really pushed beyond the envelope on this, and some of this is going to have to be walked back, and there's going to be a new way that we're going to decide as a society to handle this, right? And creation in the future, how that's compensated to go into future models, all of those things. That's something to be aware of. I would say, you know, the litmus test of what you're talking about to me would be, you know, I'm a big fan of disclosure. So I would say, ask yourself, am I comfortable being honest about like how I've used this tool, right? And you say, this is a starting point for me, you know, where you can like submit whether it's a paper or it's a work product or whatever, and you're comfortable saying, oh yeah, I use ChatGPT for this because there's a whole bunch of BS that you guys make me do to get started on this, and I let the computer do that, and then I spend my time doing it on these 5 things that are really going to matter to you, and you're proud of it. That's a pretty good sign that, you know, you're using it in a proper way. If you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to tell them I did this on LLM, you know, maybe put a little more elbow grease to it.
Yeah, exactly to that point. If you're just copying and pasting and not even reading what's spit out back at you, you need to reevaluate your priorities at that point.
Verify.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, yeah, especially if there's areas that are sort of beyond your area of expertise.
I think it's interesting that a lot of this conversation goes along with the technical side of the mind and the programming side, and we often forget that we have to cultivate creativity. Creativity, for a lot of folks in the room and a lot of folks at home, might be this inherent trait that someone was born with, and it's just not. Creativity is a muscle, right? And sometimes at a STEM institution, sometimes in a society where their technique and software development and the development of these hard skills are prioritized, we forget that building that creativity side of it enhances everything else. How would you encourage students to enhance their creativity and treat it like a muscle that they need to grow?
Practice. It's funny. I sit in a lot of code reviews, and everybody has a different flavor to their code. It's almost like a personality. I can look at code and be like, you know what? I bet I know who wrote that. So, I think that is its own form of creativity. And practice.
And use your creativity where it matters. One of the things that, you know, is a bit of a systemic problem, I guess, in the technology industry is hubris. I've worked with a lot of folks that, you know, get an idea in their head and they believe that it's novel and they spend a lot of time like working on this thing, but in reality, it's, you know, the reality is like any idea that pops into your head has been thought a million times before. The ideas that you see come to fruition because of a number of different convergence of a number of different you know, things that allow this thing to come into existence at a point in time. So using these tools to kind of get that hubris out of the way, and if you have a thought or an idea, you know, like run it through an LLM and see what comes back and see what other people have done, what they've worked on it, and then see what's not there, right? And point your creativity towards that, because that's going to be higher value than what's coming out of it.
No, that makes sense, and I agree with what everyone else is saying here. And I think one other piece that I'd like to add is relates to creativity itself. There are tons of opportunities and ideas and just ways to express oneself in this market. But the only way that you get to take advantage of those opportunities is if you have an open mind. And I think even taking a step back, even before touching a tool and getting your hands dirty and doing, you know, any level of programming, it's focusing first on having an open mind, listening to others, listening to the market, having conversations with folks, but actively listening and seeking to learn. When you take that mindset, that's what opens the doors to think and actually be able to say, an opportunity will just strike. And then then it's your time for whatever it is. I mean, this can be in your personal life or your professional development life, but it goes back to being, you know, the hubris and being humble, right? And that balance. my strongest recommendation is if you want to exercise creativity, it's to focus first on being humble and having that open mind, and then great opportunities will be coming around.
I love that. And just to pique our creative minds a little bit and looking towards the future, are there emerging AI technologies that could change the face of what we all do or what the students may be doing? And what does the future of that look like? So the specific tools that might be emerging or the features that might be emerging, and then what does the future of using that look like?
So one that I'm very excited about is basically taking the power of these large language models and these generative systems and finding ways to optimize them, to put them on a system on chip and put them into actual hardware, these generative capabilities. So even maybe it's not generative, but continuing to push the envelope of adding AI to physical hardware, system on chip solutions, because this opens the door for us to do things that we just couldn't before. Case in point, hypersonic missiles are a new thing that are coming in this space in the world. They're so fast that literally a human in the loop to try to terminate it or stop it or redirect it, it's already thousands of miles down. It's not possible. It's physically not possible to control them. So we need AI technology, and that AI technology is coming, and it's because of the intersection of what used to be large AI code bases and things like this, and trying to build these systems. We're intersecting that now with physical hardware. And because of chip technology, we can do this now. So for me, I'm just as an observer, I'm very excited to see this intersection come and what new avenues this is going to bring.
I think we just got a glimpse in the past couple of weeks of some dramatic new shifts in where things are going. So when you take the idea of multimodal generative models, and then you start thinking about the ability to inference at the edge on a chip or a device, like what you're talking about, those thought experiments of like taking away a lot of things that we've just assumed are limitations, even just in the past year, right? Like we saw things happen, and it's like, wow, there's all this amazing capability. But I don't know, in the field, you start working with it, and you see like the compute constraints and the data issues and stuff like that. So you feel like you've sort of like walked up to the wall at some point, right? But I think thinking past that and looking at where that's going to go in the next 5 years, in the next 2 years, you're going to see integration like crazy. And so the idea, thinking about how these things can be applied to virtually every technical system that's out there, we've spent the last 10 years connecting everything to the network and creating APIs for things to communicate together. And now that is just going to be fuel on this fire to really move things forward.
And if you could give all the students in the room and at home one piece of advice to use AI for a professional development tool, what would it be? Beyond resume review.
I would say for one piece of advice, it would be remember that you are the human. Ultimately, you are in control of your destiny and where you are applying your energy and effort. And under that auspice, use the tools to the absolute maximum capability as possible to give yourself the edge, because those that don't use these tools will fall behind.
I think too, to use the tools to hold yourself accountable. You can actually tell these models, hey, print me out a study guide. I have an hour a day during times 7 to 10 at night that I can study. These are the things I need to learn. Have it send me a study guide, and use that to hold yourself accountable.
I never thought of that, and that's brilliant. I really love that, actually, yeah.
I think, being a little bit of a broken record, but I think getting your hands on the most advanced language models and challenging yourself to find reasons to use them every day, and just have that running in the back of your mind of how might I apply some of this technology to a particular problem that I'm having right now, and then exercising that. And I think the most important part of that is not necessarily like the immediate benefit that you're going to get from solving that particular problem, but it's the awareness and the thought pattern that you're going to create in terms of how this technology matters in your life, both personally and professionally as you go forward. And I think that will yield dividends as you develop your skills.
And just before we wrap up and start taking questions from the house, what's one final last thought or recommendation you would like to give all of our audience here and at home regarding incorporating AI, not just into their academics or professional journey, but incorporating AI into their life as well?
Well, I'll do a shameless plug for Alexa. So these assistants like Alexa, right? They are designed, and there has been literally billions of dollars put to make this work for the human, and to help from any walk of life and at any age. I mean, my 4-year-old, right, is able to play with and talk with Alexa, all the way up to actually even my elderly grandparents. So there are technology and devices out there that have a lot of research and time have been put in place to help make our lives better and more seamless. And so I would say play with the technology, enjoy it. And again, I'm going to go for Alexa, like not Google, but Alexa devices. Yeah.
It's funny that you say your 4-year-old can do that, because I have a 2.5-year-old, and he'll be like, "Hey Siri, play Wheels on the Bus." So to that point, it's not going anywhere. We have to embrace it. This generation that is being brought up, it's just going to be part of their everyday lives. And I think it's truly not going anywhere. So the harder you push, the more problems and trouble you're going to have later on down the road. So take what's there and run with it.
Anybody who's under the age of 10 is voice native. There's an expectation that they can yell things into the air and have things happen. I think the one thing that I would say as a takeaway, this is probably something that I think as especially like in technology, we tend to, probably because of the way our brains work, we tend to not pay enough of attention to it. But I will say, use the technology in ways that's making your life better. Think about and spend some time thinking about your emotional well-being as you face all this new technology. Understand that like us as humans cannot evolve at the pace that this technology is taking on. And it is absolutely okay to form boundaries around this technology in places where it's making your life worse. And that takes some introspection to understand how you're feeling in a given circumstance when you're interacting with technology. And I hope if there's something that we've learned from the social media age is that there are benefits and there are detriments to this technology, and the AI is going to be no different. It is going to stress the limits of our ability to manage this as emotional human beings, and that's the one place where I would say, be careful. Make sure that as you're playing with all this stuff and you're learning it and using it, that you pay attention to how it's affecting you and use it in ways that make your life better.
I love that you mentioned that, and just thinking about the use of AI as a tool to make life easier, love it. But also the most challenging experience I've had, either performing as a musician and practicing or as an athlete, came when I stretched my own capabilities, right? And if I use some kind of technology to bail me out, then the capability wouldn't be there inherently. And I love that you mentioned that, like limiting yourself for the usage so you can stretch yourself to make yourself a better human in general. That's amazing. Do we have questions from the house? Yeah, I'll come to you. Oh, go ahead. I got you the microphone so everyone can hear you.
In terms of AI, what's like either, in your opinion, like the biggest limiter or limitations out there?
On a on a macro scale, at the moment, we're in a massive compute constrained environment. You're going to see new technology come on board. Everybody, in fact, it's so compute constrained right now that literally anybody that can put gold on silicon is trying to figure out better ways to do it, and that's going to happen. It's going to take a little bit of time. On a micro scale, I think we're like data and quality limited. So it's all about the size and quality of the data set that you're able to get your arms around in order to use this. And that's really why you're seeing so much better performance out of the sort of like flagship models like Bard and ChatGPT compared to some of the open source models. They're just trained on so much more data, and there is something special about the amount of data that you use with these things, and that's one of the biggest reasons, the biggest difference. It's why like GPT back when it was version 2 and 3 was kind of a nothing burger, and then all of a sudden 3.5 Turbo comes out, and everybody's like, wow.
Yeah, plus 1,000 on compute constraints, GPUs alone. As I was leaving Amazon, like that was the number one constraint that for all of these major large tech companies. I think actually that it bodes a great opportunity once again in the market for if someone can create the next AI enhanced chip or create different ways of generating compute. That now there's a huge market demand for it. On the data piece, agree with the quality portion, which is exciting, which is why huge advances have been made in data simulators or data generators as it relates for training data. So, which is exciting to see. So that was a natural response for your micro constraint, and they're still being developed and in flight.
It's going to be really interesting to see one of the things that's going to happen because we've already filled the internet with generated text is how we manage the reconsumption of this data going forward. And the research on that is really interesting. But it does come back again to the fact that it may well be a good thing as long as there's enough creativity being injected into the generated text that's going out there. But that will be one of the things to watch in the coming years, trying to get to GPT-5 and 6.
And we have one question from home, and that's probably all the time we have for it. So what's the best way for AI to be used by teachers/coaches and creating lessons for kids at elementary level in various subjects? So creating lessons for elementary kids, for teachers and coaches.
I think that...
I was going to say, just ask it very specific questions. Tell them, or tell it what you have. Like I have crayons and markers and paper. What can I do with that? Or I have googly eyes, streamers, and five-year-olds. Spit me out a project that we can do.
And describe and give it as much description of your role as possible too, as like an educator, a specific subject that you're in. The more information you can give it around context, the better your results are going to be. And then it's one of those things too where if you prompt it correctly, it's going to reach out to like a huge corpus of child development research and help that influence what it tells you to do for these kids. So tell it your circumstances, like you said, tell it the outcomes that you're looking for, and and ask away.
Just at a high level, since we're short on time, my recommendation would be, as a teacher and academic coach or whatnot, research prompt engineering. Take an extra few cycles. There are tons of resources actually out there on how do you do prompt engineering in such a way that gets the results that you're looking for, whether it be laddering, single shot, multi-shot. There are so many different ways you can interact with these models now. So if you take take a few cycles, study prompt engineering, then get to apply it, and then before you know it, you're going to get results out of these systems that you just weren't going to get before.
Kayla, I think you hit the nail on the head for the title of my next children's book, crayons, googly eyes, and generative AI. I think we really nailed it. So thanks to our panelists for coming here. Thanks to our amazing audience in the house and at home. One big round of applause. Derek Hoyt, Kayla Cullen, Jameson Rotz. Thanks so much for coming to Career Week. We have amazing events for the rest of the week. Check it out. And then ask our panelists some questions afterwards. Thanks, everybody.